To mail in your pledge, send your check to Channel 13, P.O. Box 13, Dallas, Texas 75221. Thank you.
This is Channel 13, Dallas, Fort Worth, Denton. Remember When is made possible in part by Gardier & Wen, LLP, offering legal services to local, national, and international businesses. And by St. Paul Medical Center, serving the community for nearly 100 years.
Downtown Dallas is recognized today for its dramatic skyline and monumental architecture. In the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the real focal point was on the street. Downtown was a hub of activity. Not only were there businesses, it was also the center for entertainment, shopping, and social events. From sunup to sundown and on into the night, Dallas was considered the place to be.
Dallas was alive at that time. It was alive with cars, it was alive with colors and lights and people.
You had all the lights that you have on Broadway and 7th Avenue now. It was lighted, it was beautiful, and you'd see all your friends walking up and down the streets.
I miss the music you could remember. A music that when you dance with someone that it can linger with you forever. It was a good time.
Downtown Dallas was thriving in the 30s, and Lawrence Birdsong didn't want to miss any of it. Whether it was the multifaceted theaters all on in a row, hearing the whirl of his first Wurlitzer organ, or entering the world of live radio. And lucky for him, these all intersected with each other to guarantee a day well spent.
My weekend consisted of getting on the streetcar, the Junius Heights car, and going on down to the Baker Hotel. And at that time, there was a very popular program called Early Birds, which was an orchestra, and the show ran for about an hour, 7 till 8 o'clock.
21 minutes, 40 seconds past 7 o'clock. Early bird time. Nick Ramsey a moment ago.
After the Early Bird show on WFAA, Birdsong would cross the street to the Adolphus to hear another radio show on KRLD.
And then after I finished with KRLD, it was a 3 or 4 block walk up Elm Street to the Melba Theater.
The Melba Kitty Club was a talent show produced from the stages of the Melba Theater on Saturday morning and broadcast on WRR.
And it was an exposure for those kids whose mothers could shove them out on the stage to do some form of entertainment.
You would vote at the end. They would line everybody on the stage, and they would hold their hands over. You would clap for that person. Whoever got the most claps won.
After the Kitty Club was over, the curtain opened and the show began. First, there were a couple of cartoons. Then maybe a few comedies, such as the Our Gang Follies. And in a regular feature, they would show newsreels.
By improving the Trinity River for navigation,
a travelogue, and, of course, a cereal.
Man's name, written on the sky by a mysterious airplane.
Now, cereal is where they have these cliff-hanging situations on Saturday, and you have to wait till next Saturday to see if they come out alive, and they always did.
Well, it looks like I'm a marked man, doesn't it?
Around the time of World War II, sing-alongs were popular. Originally, the audience sang with the organist accompanying slides with songs or parodies of the day, and later sang along to the bouncing ball.
Just follow the bouncing hen fruit.
For 25 cents, we could spend Saturday morning and stay all afternoon if we wanted to and see the main feature 2-3 more times. Ah, this is some corner here. No trace of a very fine lady, the Palace Theater.
The Palace Theater was known as the sentimental movie house with its love stories and drawing room comedies, and of course, everyone remembers the organ.
It was really exciting at the Palace because when the organ would come up out of the basement, just booming and filling the theater with sound, it was really a lot of fun.
And finally, the grand lady at the top of Elm Street, the ever beautiful Majestic.
The Majestic Theater in Dallas opened in 1921. I attended with our neighborhood gang. I think I determined then that I'd like to work for Carl Hoblitzell, who had built the theater.
It started, as many theaters had, as a vaudeville house.
When vaudeville passed on, we'd have what we call unit shows, a name star with a show around him, along with a movie. And that was the vogue mostly during the 30s.
Going to the Majestic was always an event.
The Majestic Theater was just enthralling. It was just this big place with everything fancy and so different from the neighborhood theaters.
The ceiling was sky, and little stars twinkled.
One of the world's first atmospheric theaters, the Majestic had 4 levels of seating, each with its own admission price. In addition, the 4th balcony had its own separate admission.
Blacks had to sit up on the balcony, and certain hours you could go in and out, so I chose not to.
We would go, but they had a little cubby hole up there that we would have to sit in, but that's how we got to see.
And we had a porter that took them up on the elevator. They had a concession stand up there. And it stayed full, too.
Even the lobby had multiple levels. During the 20s and early 30s, Mr. Hoblitzell had a special babysitting service in the lower lobby, and kids loved it.
Majestic Land was a place where parents could, when they became patrons of the theater, they could go down and check their children into this nursery.
Sort of a miniature Disneyland, really. They had a shoe that was a slide, and that was the old woman who lived in the shoe. There was a merry-go-round, hand-operated, where the cribs were, the Sandman thing.
The Majestic was looked upon as the leading action movie house, and appropriately, its last movie was James Bond in Live and Let Die.
And of course, Theater Row, there wasn't anything like it in this state, Dallas. Elm had all the theaters. Of course, with all of these lights of these marquees and these verticals burning, you could read a newspaper across the street.
Not everyone may have spent the entire day in a theater like Lawrence Birdsong. Others may have come downtown just for lunch. In fact, it was quite popular for a group of women to go have lunch at Dot Franey's famous ice show. Speed skating Olympic champion Dorothy Franey began her reign as the queen of the ice show at the Adolphus Hotel in 1943.
We had a 20 by 24-foot ice rink in the Century Room, and then we had a rolling, movable floor that would come out over the ice rink and cover that for dancing. Well, then that would move back underneath the bandstand, and the ice rink would be there. What you wanted to do when you went to the Century Room is have a table right there by the ice, because the skater would come and just swirl those skates, and that ice shavings would just cloud you with ice.
Dorothy Freeney never lacked in imagination when creating her shows.
We had a adagio routine that the girl would pass her body through a tennis racket, and she would be hanging around the boy's neck with her skates and her skating shoes, and then he would hand her the racket. She'd pass her whole body through the tennis racket. We had still skaters. We had everything that you could imagine. I was the only woman that ever skated on speed skates, figure skates, and still skates. And it was a place for everyone to bring their grandmother, their aunts, their uncles, the children, because it was a family show.
In addition to the ice shows, fashion shows also held weekly court at the Adolphus.
The women would come in dressed immaculately and like they had just stepped out of Vogue. As a matter of fact, Dallas had the reputation of having the most beautiful women and the most beautifully groomed.
Everybody dressed up. I always wore a hat and gloves, heels. And walking on the cement in those days in high heels was a job, but you would not go downtown without being dressed.
Back in those days, we wore double-breast backpack suits and none shoes, and no cap Stace Adams shoes, Edmund claps, and crepe machine shirts and silk shirts. Back in those days, we came downtown.
Dallas didn't shut down at sunset. There was still plenty to do at night.
The music was so different then. You really had a good time dancing. Back in the 40s, especially from 42 on, we had to find our own entertainment because, of course, Dallas was very segregated at that time, and so we could not go downtown. So our main focus was the Empire Room. It was first the Rose Room, but it was located on Hall Street.
Once known as North Dallas, Hall Street was a lively center of activity both day and night, and Howard Lewis's Rose Room was a popular club for socializing.
This was the point where all of the society clubs and all of the different talents would come in and play. We'd have flow shows and then a lot of local talent. And it was just a wonderful time.
Another popular place in Dallas started as a drive-in soda fountain in a parking lot big enough for a plane to land on Lovers and Greenville in 1940. The owners were a couple named Lou and Ann.
Lou Ann's was the place for all the high school and the college kids to go. And it went on for years there, and it was packed. It was every Friday, Saturday night, it was full. They had an indoor and an outdoor dancing place. We all drank Cokes and things like that. We danced, and they had bands out there, and it was really just a lot of fun.
Harry James came often to Lou Ann's, and the biggest draw was Lawrence Welk in January of 1956. Women whose names were Lou Ann could get in free, and anyone could get in free on their birthday.
It was a rite of passage and part of growing up and just somewhere you should be. And it was almost like it was an important date if you went to Lou Ann's, too.
It was also a date parents never worried about because they had gone to Lou Ann's when they were young, and all they would have to do is call Ann Bovis and ask her to look after their daughter on her first date. Traditionally, at midnight or 1 a.m., one song ended each evening.
Good night, sweetheart.
During the years that I went there, it was Goodnight Ladies, or Goodnight Sweetheart, and then later Dream.
But I do remember the feelings that it was your last dance with your boyfriend for the evening, and then the evening would be over, which was, you really kind of didn't want it ever to be over.
Whether it's the end of an evening, the end of a song, or the end of an era, it's always sad to see it end. Not only do we miss the grand old movie palaces, hotels, and nightclubs, but also the complete feeling of freedom, of a life that was simple, fun, and worry-free.
Good night, sweetheart. Good
I feel the Flying Red Horse is important to the people of Dallas because it symbolizes their power, their strength, and their energy that's made this city a great city that it is today. A lot of people in Dallas think the sign was put up for the Texas Centennial in 1936, but it was actually put up for the National Petroleum Institute Convention in 1934. They ordered this sign 2 months before the convention from a Texlite company in Dallas. They wanted the sign to revolve and turn, and the engineers all said it couldn't be done. My grandfather, who was chief engineer and treasurer, got the job to put it up and had 2 months to put it up. He prayed about it one night and had a dream or vision, and he says the story. God showed him how to design this mechanism. He woke up and wrote it all down, and they went and manufactured it, and it's still up there today.
Pilots used to use it as a landmark to land on Love Field. I know when I was a kid and we used to drive out to McKinney, when we saw the horse, we knew we still had an hour to drive.
Our landmark was the Magnolia Building because of the Red Horse. And a lot of our parents that did not know how to speak English, they would say, "We'll meet at El Caballo Colorado."
There are actually 2 horses on top of the Magnolia Building. And there was a riddle that people always asked, which pointed out our friendly rivalry, sometimes not so friendly rivalry, with our neighbor across the river, Fort Worth. And that riddle was, do you know why there are 2 horses on the Magnolia Building? And when people would say no, then the answer was, that's so Fort Worth will know Dallas is not a 1-horse town.
When you drive into Dallas from a trip now, it's nostalgic hunting for the Red Horse. You know he's in there somewhere, but it's a little sad that he's not the first skyscraper you see.
And my children and I and my wife, we always have a sense of pride knowing that it's still there, and it's a tie to our past, as well as I think it's a tie to the past of many citizens in Dallas.
Do you remember when the Flying Red Horse...
Bounded by McKinney Avenue on the east, the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas Railroad on the west, Little Mexico expanded north to Maple Avenue and encompassed what is now the Arts District and the West End Historical District. The area once was home to Jewish families, but later declined and became the city's red light district. When Dallas police cleaned up the area, Mexican immigrants moved in alongside the remaining Jewish families. Much of Little Mexico was a neighborhood of shotgun and frame houses, boxcars, and tents. The railroads and factories that surrounded it provided employment for many. Some farmed land outside the city. But Little Mexico was also home to profitable businesses, as generations of Mexican Americans raised their families within sight of downtown Dallas, in a community that was close-knit and self-sufficient.
All the businesses were right there on McKinney, and they were either a grocery store or restaurants or bars. The main restaurant was El Phoenix, you know, and it was right there too in McKinney. And then there was like a shoe repair shop and a little bookstore and another restaurant, the Tortilla Factory, Mrs. Luna Tortilla Factory. And
Ramon Navarro remembers the old neighborhood well. His memories are easily revived with the help of 2 small watercolors he painted of his community when he was only 7 years old. That was in 1937.
When I look at them, I can remember, I can even remember the sounds, you know, the trucks, the sound of the cars, you know. It just, they're just good memories. I can remember a lot of things, a lot of nice things, just by looking at the watercolor drawings.
One of Navarro's pleasant memories was going to the Mexican theater on Saturday afternoon.
The movies were mostly about cowboys, you know, Mexican charros, and the girls and the guys, you know, fighting over the girl and serenading the girl, you know. But that's what people did on Saturdays.
People also like to eat out. Navarro's father owned several restaurants in Little Mexico.
He was famous for his enchiladas. The enchilada plate was what kind of made him famous, you know. And it was very popular.
The Hernandez grocery store on Alamo Street is still in business, not far from where Pedro Hernandez opened his original store in 1925. Today, the store mostly caters to people who work nearby. In its heyday, Hernandez Fine Foods was one of two main stores that served the entire population of Little Mexico. Socorro Hernandez worked alongside her husband Pedro in the community store. The family later opened additional stores. She remembers when the area that now houses the city's arts district was a mixture of city life and farm life.
While I was married, I raised chickens, turkeys, little goats, and little piggies.
Right in your home?
Uh-huh, over there, behind in the store.
The Alonzo family bakery opened in 1926 when Martin and Ramon Alonzo began selling their freshly baked sweetbreads. They also sold grocery items out of the place they call La Colonial Panaderia. Today, Martin Alonzo continues the family baking tradition in his own shop that carries the old family name.
There's no machines to make nothing bread. It's hard work. I was brought up young. I was learning how to do this bread with my grandfather and my uncle. And it's been the same way for the last 50 years that I know of.
Alonzo gets emotional when he talks about the old days in the bakery, working alongside his grandfather, father, and uncle.
Really enjoyed my best time at the bakery was during the weekends because it was more people. It was a lot happier times. We had people, and then they had music. We had a lot of music. My uncle used to have a trio play outside to attract people to come in.
Alonzo still cooks up the same treats his forefathers baked.
Pan de huevo, plancha, alamare, polvorón.
For the enjoyment of a new generation.
Oh, that you all remember. Flores, right, yeah.
Once a year, former residents of Little Mexico gather to reminisce about the old days in the community.
I would go into everybody's house, you know, and deliver the ice. And, of course, you know, if they were cooking, they'd offer, you know, little morsels for, you know. And I was a kid, you know, 14, 15 years old and carrying that ice.
And I remember when I was a little kid, and the ladies would make a fresh tortilla, and then they would pinch it and make little faces, because, you know, I was a little girl and I was a little pet, and they would give me tortillas con carita de...
but you know, when we used to live in the area, we had a community. Everybody knew who was who and what was what. Everybody knew when somebody died, and everybody would go to the funeral. Then, when the toll road came through, they got expanded out to further North Dallas, and some went to West Dallas. Some moved to Oak Cliff. Now somebody dies, we don't even know when they die.
The yearly reunion is but a shadow of the fiestas in decades past. For years, Pike Park, where the event is held, was the recreational heart of Little Mexico. Downtown Dallas was only a short walk away from the neighborhood.
I tell my kids now, I says, gosh, you know, I used to go downtown every night. That's what we did. We window shop, you know. We would go downtown and start, you know, at one end of Main or Elm and walk all the way to the Majestic and then go down again on either Elm or Main Street and just window shop, you know. And we were never scared or afraid to get, mugged or robbed or anything,
My God, look at it, it's all vacant. There was so much life there.
From the offices where he works, Abel Barron can look down on what used to be Little Mexico.
Since it was on the top of a hill, you could see all of downtown Dallas with all the lights on, either in the morning or in the evening. Every once in a while, I'd save up my allowance and I'd go downtown and catch a show at the Majestic. I remember seeing Patton there when it first came out on the big screen. For $1, I could take the 10-cent bus ride downtown and get myself either a large popcorn and a soft drink or a hot dog and a soft drink. And if I wanted a candy bar afterwards, then I'd have to walk home. But that was okay. It was only a few blocks back. So that was a lot of fun.
Our Lady of Guadalupe Church was the spiritual heart of the community. In addition to weekly Mass, religious plays called pastorellas were popular. The yearly Posada, or nativity recreation, was a sacred event everyone looked forward to.
I have this image of walking down behind my mom, and we're all holding candles, and we're following the parish preacher, and they're holding up the little nativity scene, and behind that, the Virgin Mary, and we're all parading down to the church at midnight. So it's an image that I'll never lose. It was really the hub. Anyone who came into Dallas of Hispanic origin congregated to this area.
In the 1960s, construction of the Dallas North Tollway began through the heart of Little Mexico. The property of Mexican-American residents fell under eminent domain, and the owners were forced to sell their homes for an average price of $10,000. By 1970, Little Mexico had dwindled to the housing project, Pike Park, and a few pockets of homes. During the 1980s, banks, luxury hotels, restaurants, and office buildings had replaced the community, but the memories remain.
There were good old days, that's right,
It's a lot of fond memories there. A lot of fond memories.
I think it's important that you younger people hear about what Love Field represented to the city as well as to the government. Love Field was different than other airstrips during the war because primarily you had an Air Force base operating at the same time as a civilian operation.
And Love Field is very special to me because it was where they sent me to work in my first military job. I was very proud to be able to serve with the women that I was fortunate enough to be stationed with and that I got to know during the war.
Love Field was a military base when I was a child. It was a place you could watch these neat airplanes and you could dream about different places you could go. It's just a fun place to go and dream.
The excitement was just the thrill of the fact that flying was not something that everybody did in those days.
We used to watch from the roof of the old terminal building the different celebrities that came in town.
My most vivid memory of Love Field as a youngster growing up was the day that the first jet commercial flight landed at Love Field. Up to that point, it had been airplanes with propellers, and this was very exciting to me to see an airplane come in with no propellers.
I recall when they first had moving sidewalks at Love Field, it was just like the newest innovation. It was just like something no one had ever heard of. And people would go out there just to ride on the sidewalk.
Love Field was special to me because where I met my wife. And I guess it was love at Love Field. That's why that's very special to me. I still get a thrill out of going there.
Ballparks are a passion among baseball fans, second only to the game itself. It has been said that decades after people have stopped collecting bubblegum cards, they can still collect the memory of ballparks. Not just the stadiums, but their surrounding neighborhoods, their sounds, their smells, and their special seasons. One such stadium was Burnett Field. Nestled against the Trinity levees in Oak Cliff, Burnett Field was one of the grand old ballparks typical of the turn-of-the-century baseball stadium. The stands much closer to the playing field, allowing the die-hard baseball fan to develop an intimacy with the players that was very unique to that era's ballparks. It was this atmosphere that made attending Dallas Eagle ball games at Burnett Field a family outing, as longtime fan Buster Lyon remembers.
To me, Burnett Field was just one big happy family. I'll tell you, it seemed like everybody knew each other, especially in the section we were in there. We were right at third base, right even with third base there over the Dallas dugout. And all the box holders got to know each other, and even the people back behind us, because I did meet so many people and made real good friends with a lot of people. And then I got to where I got in with the ball players there, and we'd have parties for the ball players and just have a real good time. And we had some great ball teams back in those days.
Known as Rebel Stadium throughout the 1940s, the ballpark was later renamed Burnett Field in 1948 when the team was purchased by flamboyant East Texas oil man Dick Burnett. Burnett Field, home of the perennial Texas League champion Dallas Eagles, housed professional baseball until the stadium was torn down in 1966. George Sheps, former owner of the Dallas Giants, Steers, and Rebels, reminisces about a time in 1946 when overflow crowds to see championship baseball in Oak Cliff were commonplace.
And on opening day of 46, we had seats for 454 people. We had over 13,000. I had to build a special bleachers out right beyond the right field towards the center field fence. And we lined them up by a rope. And right before we got started, about 15 minutes, my groundskeeper, who was a personal friend of mine, come running out there, and he says, "When are you going to stop selling tickets?" I said, "When you run out of rope."
Burnett Field gave Dallas great times and great players. Fans were not only treated to early careers of future Hall of Famers, but also a much-publicized rookie from the New York Yankees, Mickey Mantle. Dallas teams were not without their share of players with Major League talent. The Eagles, winners of 4 pennants in 10 years, possessed some of the best talent in the minor leagues at the time. Pitcher Red Murph won 27 games in the 1955 pennant-winning season, including 19 in a row. Murph, along with Pete Burnside and Dave Hoskins, kept the Eagles at the top of the Texas League throughout the 50s.
Texas League has always been probably the premier development of Major League ball players. The president of the National League today is named Bill White, and he played with me on the Dallas Eagle Ball Club at Burnett Field. Was a great first baseman and was a great major leaguer and is now the president of the National League.
Framed by a colorful array of billboard ads, Burnett Field played host to numerous Major League exhibition games, including the Cleveland Indians and the New York Giants, before an overflow crowd of 13,000 on a Sunday afternoon in April of 1951, one of the largest crowds in the ballpark's history. However, true to minor league form, it sometimes took more than exceptional baseball talents to lure big crowds to the games day after day. Some of the more unique promotions were the brainchild of former owner George Sheps.
Well, one of the things I'm very proud of, the Miss Texas group came to me and said that they wanted to do something different, and of course they thought I was going to suggest something else, and I suggested they have the Miss Texas finals in the ballpark, and they did. When they came out in those flowing, beautiful white dresses, it looked like they were skating over the diamond. The crowd just really cheered and cheered and cheered. When they started parading around that field, you could see all the boys' guys just bulging all out of their heads.
Inez Tedley was the Texas League's first organist. A fixture at Dallas Eagle ball games, Miss Inez convinced generations of fans that no seventh inning would ever be the same without her songs.
From 1949 I played all their home games until 1965. It was so much fun being with people, and now I have children who were children back then. They are grown and have families who come in and say, I sat at the organ bench with you at Burnett Field, and I love that.
Some sentimental fans provided their own reasons for attending a particular game at Burnett Field.
We had been engaged for approximately 2 years, and I set our wedding date and looked for an apartment and so on and so forth. And then my husband lost his job, was laid off at the post office. It was 6 months before he got another job. This was during the worst of the Depression. And we decided that when he was making $18 a week, we could get married. I think he started back at 15 or something like that. And so we went to the ball game at Burnett Field. And in the course of the game, I felt his arm slip around my waist, and he whispered in my ear, I got a raise to $18 today. And boy, my heart just nearly jumped out of my chest. But I don't think we stayed much longer.
Sometimes promotions were left up to the fans' ingenuity.
I had a chance, this good old Dave had a pawn shop. He had case after case of these little small cowbells. Not the big ones, but the small cowbells. So I bought every case he had and took them to the ballpark with me one night when we was playing a crucial game. And I passed them out amongst all the fans and told them, now let's get with it. When I stand up and get with the bell, well, you all get with the bell. Kind of a cheerleader, you know. Well, they did, and they loved those bells. I'm telling you, they will love those bells. And at every ball game, of course, you know, if they was coming back to the ball game, they'd bring their bell.
Buster's son, Ted, also the bat boy for the Eagles between 1957 and 1961, had his own perspective on Dad's role as the #1 fan.
It was wild and crazy in those days, especially any time the team made it to the playoffs. He would bring the big boxes of cowbells out there, and he had a siren that he would crank up, and he could get, it was sort of like the Wave today. He was the Wave of Burnett Field. He could get the people standing up between my dad and Miss Inez. They'd wake all of Oak Cliff and half of downtown up.
Burnett Field was unforgettable baseball tradition. The stadium may be gone from the landscape, but not from our memories.
Burnett Field to me is just a house of memories. I can drive by it or think of Burnett Field today or look at pictures and still not only remember things that went on, but because of the time that I spent actually on the field and in the dugout, in the clubhouse, I can actually smell the smell out there of the grass and the baseballs and the bats and so on and so forth. And it's just a tremendous memory that I think will live on forever.
I drive by on the expressway and I look down at that vacant piece of property. I'm sure it's valuable. And I don't see the value in that property. I hear the laughter and the songs and the music that came out of that area for years and years and years. I can hear the ball players talking to each other in their kidding rivalry manner. I can hear the crack of the bat. I can feel the ball hitting into my glove if I think about it. I get lots of good memories about Burnett Field. I sure do think that we have to preserve some of these historical places.
I didn't know too much about baseball when I first started. I attended games, but as I went along, I found so much music that could apply to the plays and the games. And I tried to do appropriate numbers for things that happened out on the field. Of course, I always played Take Me Out to the Ball Game as the pitcher walked out to the mound. Then at the 7th inning stretch, I always played Under the Double Eagle, which was the Eagles' theme song.
People just loved her.
everybody would come by and talk to her and marvel at the way that she could play and talk and listen and never miss a note.
I made up my own agenda, and it went over so well that other teams in the league sent organists up to the games, and they put in organs after the first year we did it.
I think the ball games at Burnett Field without the organ and with Miss Inez specifically playing the organ would have been just another ball game. It was a color and an extra flavor.
In 1952, they had a special Miss Inez night. The fans and the merchants, everybody brought gifts. I had so many gifts, they brought in a big pickup truck. It took me about 3 days to go through all of them. It was a great time. Well, believe it or not, I'm still playing. Because now I play mostly request.
We hope you are enjoying this look at Dallas's past and the special places and people like Burnett Field, and especially Miss Inez. What a great piece on Miss Inez, if you remember her from not only Luby's, but Burnett Field, and she played for the
If you wish to mail in your pledge, send your check to Channel 13, P.O. Box 13, Dallas, Texas 75221. Thank you.
This is Channel 13, Dallas, Fort Worth, Denton.
White Rock is a landmark of Dallas from the very beginning. They needed a lake. The wells were running dry, so we needed more water for Dallas, and White Rock Lake was there. My own special memory of White Rock Lake would be the picnics. That was the place you went on a picnic. You know, you'd circle the lake and try to find the very best spot. Driving around, oh, there's a good spot. I can remember my mother said, there it is, that's the ideal spot. And we'd stop. Picnic, that was where everybody went on a picnic.
Well, I grew up around White Rock, and our whole family just spent hours and hours there. Even my first date with my now husband, Bob, took place there about 47 or 8 years ago at the Dreyfus Club. It was a really nice evening. The stars were out, and we walked outside the Dreyfus Club when we weren't dancing, and it was just a real happy occasion.
The swimming in White Rock was fun because there was a natural beach. You felt like you were at Padre Island or Laguna Beach or somewhere. It was all we had, and it was a great place.
White Rock Lake has some wonderful memories. When I was in high school, it was the place where we went to swim at the bathhouse. Of course, I even played hooky and went swimming there in the daytime, which you weren't supposed to do, but a lot of the kids did it.
The Bonnie Barge was a boat back in the 50s that went up and down the White Rock Lake. They had a jukebox on it, and you could dance, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful boat. The Bonnie Barge was a very romantic place in the 50s. I remember asking my husband, what do you remember about the Bonnie Barge? And he said, oh, I remember being in love.
I love the spillway. I'll never forget the times we were allowed to walk across it. You could sometimes see fish going over, and there would be ducks above it and below it, and there were no signs yet that said, don't go wading here. So, of course, we all waded down there.
Well, the spillway has just always been a place to go. When it rained a lot, everybody always go out to the spillway and say, my, look at the water. And it would roll down. It's still exciting. It's still fun to go out to White Rock because of the memories. And those trees are still there. Some of the piers are still there, and lots of memories.
Howdy, folks. This is Big Tex. But you knew that.
For the thousands who visit the State Fair of Texas every year, Big Tex is but one of its legendary attractions. During its October run, the fair sets aside 2 days in honor of senior citizens who come out in large numbers to enjoy treats only the State Fair can boast of.
Oh, goody, good for my tummy.
While the seniors take in the popular attractions of this year's fair, many still cherish memories of other times and other fairs.
I remember that it cost 60 cents to get in. Hamburgers were about a dime, cold drinks were a nickel, and all the shows were 50 cents.
We'd go in them side shows where they had the fat women and the skinny men and all that.
I couldn't wait to come the first day it opened, and when I walked in the front gates, it was just like being in a fairyland because they had the lights all over everywhere, and it really was something to see.
My friends of Texas, I have come here today to bear the tribute of the nation to you on your 100th birthday, for you are 100 years young.
The state fair that most people say they remember actually wasn't a fair at all. The 1936 Texas Centennial was a 180-day, multi-million-dollar exposition that was 10 years in the planning.
It put Dallas on the map. It made Dallas, Texas. We have our state fairs henceforth from that date, and everybody looks forward to the state fairs in October.
Famous old Ranger Captain Hughes raises the flag, the Lone Star flag of Texas.
362 pounds. Now watch it. Let's see. Hey, there goes the winner right now. Look at him. By golly. Here you are, Sheriff. Help yourself.
In 1936, the country was just coming out of the Depression. The Centennial had a tremendous impact on the local economy, focusing national attention on the Southwest. Its magnificent grounds and buildings would become a lasting legacy.
Let's go, the Midway. We're on the Midway. Pretty girls, funny shows, thrilling rides.
Without a doubt, entertainment was the key to the success of the Centennial, whether it was on the Midway or in the exhibit halls.
The exhibits were marvelous, and of course, to a 9.5-year-old, it was quite a lot of excitement out there all the time. One of them that was quite interesting was the large dinosaurs. I know that they had in front of the Sinclair Oil Museum exhibit, and those big, huge dinosaurs would fight with each other. They had them motorized, and they would growl and fight, and that was quite an impressive thing to us.
Gladys Pulley remembers another exhibit that was also a hit with the kids.
They had a ranger house out there with an exhibit, and it was like the Law West of the Pecos building. You know, they had an old porch out on the front of it, and you went in and you got your picture taken, you got a badge, and you were honorary junior ranger. It says, like a good ranger, I'll be brave, honest, obedient, and always keep my eyes open for danger.
All of these are done in Art Deco. They all have the date and things with the Texas Centennial on them.
Charles Cavanaugh has collected over 3,500 pieces of Centennial memorabilia. He, too, was 9 years old when the Centennial made its mark on Dallas. Cavanaugh fondly remembers a place called Tiny Town.
I had my picture taken with one of the midgets there. They had their own little town put together. There were some 78 or so, but I had my picture taken with one of the ladies called Mae West. And a 9-year-old having a picture taken with a midget called Mae West was, of course, I didn't know who Mae West was at the time, but it was really a nice experience.
Martha Albee remembers going to the Centennial with her Sunday school class. A few years later, she won the freckle contest at the fair.
My friend urged me to enter the contest. I didn't want to do it, But she convinced me that because the prize was going to be free tickets to every ride on the Midway, I did it, and I won. And we had a very good time that day. Very good time. In fact, I guess that's one day that the freckles paid off.
Martha's mother, Emma Cooper, has her own memories of winning a contest at the fair. In 1931, she entered an Afghan into competition.
It was made by my mother, and it has been my very pride and joy. So when the fair came along, I was like all little country girls and Waco girls who come to live in Dallas, and I entered it in the fair and got the first prize, and that was in 1931. And I've enjoyed it ever since and have taken good care of it.
During those days, a trip to the fair demanded some pretty fancy clothes.
It was like a reception because everybody would dress up and
You can
come
tell
out.
how dressed up they are.
And then we would go into the foods building, and that was worthwhile because they would give you a little bitty sample of a certain food. But I don't care, it tasted better than if you buy a whole tub full.
Big Tex showed up on the fair scene for the first time in 1952. For decades, his famous howdy greeted fairgoers thanks to a man named Jim Lowe.
I started as the voice of Big Tex in 1954.
He remembers when Big Tex was Santa Claus.
Yeah, Santa Claus in Hearne, Texas put him up. The Chamber of Commerce did. I think it was 50 or 51 or maybe 49. They had him 3 or 4 years, and they had him in the town square as a Santa Claus, had him all dressed up. And for some reason, they gave up on that concept, and they sold the framework. The State Fair bought the Santa Claus and brought him up here and turned him into Big Tex. And maybe kind of retained part of the soul of Santa Claus when he got here.
There were corny dogs with a lot of mustard, the nutty bars, ice cream bars, and cotton candy.
Ann Miner's childhood memories of the fair aren't a lot different from her mother's, with one major exception. When Frankie Andrews was young, the state fair was still segregated. Until the 1960s, African Americans could attend the fair only one day during the October run.
Since we didn't know anything but that one day, it was real nice for us then. But it'd be so many people out there that one day seemed like it was going to be a stomping.
The fair boasted a lot of events that appealed to individual interests, like the livestock competitions and the cooking contests. The latest cars were always on exhibit at the fair every year. So were the latest technological advancements. Many Texans saw color TV for the first time while visiting the fair in the late 50s. Many fairgoers lined up to make their first long-distance call at an exhibit sponsored by the local phone company. But few attractions captured the hearts of fairgoers over the years like the Midway.
I think as a young person, naturally, one of my treats going to the fair was going to the Midway. And the Midway always caught my eye because of the gaudy canvas paintings at the sideshows, and I always had an interest in going into the sideshows and seeing these interesting oddities in the world. And one of the oddities was this fellow who was billed as the fattest man in the world.
My sister would take us when we were small, my sister and my mother. They would take us all to the fair, and we'd be in Kittyland. We had a lot of fun and everything, but some of the kids were older, and they got to go to the Midway. I'd see that big Midway sign up there, and I couldn't go. I couldn't go. She wouldn't let me go. And so finally, after a while, I got a chance to get out of there, out of Kittyland, and get to the Midway. And I enjoyed the shows, the side shows. Some of them that we really couldn't get in, but you could sneak you know, go around the back of the tent or whatever and sort of peek inside. The ladies who were doing the the belly dance and stuff. It was funny, though.
It was a great thrill to invite your girlfriends to go on the roller coaster, because when it made the sharp turns, you automatically, if you had your arm around them, you got to hug your girlfriend.
The individual remembrances of fairgoers may be unique, but they are no doubt duplicated in the memories of hundreds of thousands of Texans. They share a belief that the State Fair of Texas is indeed the biggest and best in the country. And as Time magazine once said of the Texas State Fair, the more it changes, the more it stays the same.